Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with extra history with the last part of their Cuban Missile Crisis. So, yeah, this is basically the end of the crisis. They finally come to a deal. I think we all know the history, but let's take a look back, huh? With Black Saturday. Closest we ever got, I guess. So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Here we go.
October 27th, 3:35 a.m. The bomber lets go. A flash lights the Arctic Circle. Shockwaves tear outward with the power of 20 Hiroshima bombs. Radioactive ash collects on the barren island below. A Soviet atmospheric test scheduled before the crisis.
Oof.
In Cuba, Soviet troops are transporting warheads to the missile sites. They and the American troops in Florida are prepared for an invasion.
They're close.
At the quarantine line, Soviet subs play cat and mouse with American destroyers. At noon, America conducts its own test. A mushroom cloud rises 60,000 feet over the Pacific. Thus dawns Black Saturday, the day mankind came closest to nuclear destruction. The clock sits at 11:59.
Yep. One misstep and we're screwed.
This Cold War series is brought to you by Dominations. If you want to get your Khrushchev on, check out the link in the description. 11:59 a.m. A U-2 pilot searches the horizon. He had taken off 8 hours before to collect air samples from the Soviet atmospheric test. But this close to magnetic north, all navigation is celestial, and the northern lights have wiped the sky clean. He has had to guess his way back to Alaska, and something about the ground below looks off somehow.
Uh-oh.
Little does he know, Soviet jets lurk 15,000 feet below him, ready to strike when he descends. He's just flown into the Soviet Union. At the White House, XCOM is at the end of their rope. They'd nearly agreed to accept Khrushchev's deal, pledging never to invade Cuba in exchange for Russia dismantling the missiles. But 2 hours ago, Radio Moscow broadcast a new deal. Khrushchev also wants U.S. missiles withdrawn from Turkey. The new Soviet position is tough because it's so reasonable. Missiles for missiles. It would go down well at the UN. Kennedy leans toward accepting. The missiles are obsolete and due for withdrawal anyway. But the Hawks revolt.
Hey.
This will break NATO. It's trading away an ally's safety for our own. Rival factions in XCOM begin drafting their own responses to the offer. Meanwhile,
Honestly, if I ever heard that, I would be like, hey, they have their own army. They don't need us being their watchdogs. Okay? Sheesh. Like, at that point, like, seriously? You're... These XCOM guys, you gotta admit, you know? Anyway, even I would agree, yep, easy trade, just take the missiles back, yeah, easy enough. Anyway.
the generals are preparing for air sorties in Cuba, starting Monday. Kennedy convinces them to delay until Tuesday, but time for diplomacy is running out. Then, they hear that a U-2 is overdue from Cuba. At 1 p.m., generals are rushing to put the U.S. nuclear force on full alert. In the event of war, they need everything ready, even if it means cutting corners. Nuclear weapons are supposed to work on the buddy system, where no one man is able to fire. But in the chaos, that's waived. Single-seat jets are equipped with tactical nukes. To get the new Minuteman missiles online, commanders jury-rig a solution that bypasses safety protocols. If an error occurs, the Minutemen will launch within 30 seconds. At 2:25 p.m., the lost U-2 pilot, out of fuel, finally glides into a rural airstrip in Alaska. For 2 hours, a navigator has been carefully guiding him in by radio. Only then does he learn that his excursion over the USSR lit up every Soviet air defense system in the sector. MiGs hunted him the whole time, thinking he was preparing for a bombing run. His legs give out. At 4:20 p.m., XCOM is beginning to question everything. Why did Khrushchev offer 2 deals in 24 hours? In fact, how do they know they're negotiating with Khrushchev at all? The tones of the messages were pretty different. What if there was a coup and the Red Army has taken over? They're going in circles now. Then they hear the news. The overdue U-2 isn't coming back. The Soviets shot it down. Escalation. At 5:50 p.m.,
Oh, that
Khrushchev phones his family.
wrong, you
A
two?
car is coming to pick them up. They're going to the vacation house. Don't ask questions. The U-2 shoot-down has shaken him to his core. Who ordered it? He'd told Soviet troops to defend themselves, not fire on unarmed planes. And Castro had sent that crazy letter urging a first strike on the United States. Were Soviet troops now following Cuban orders? And if so, would the next unauthorized launch be nuclear? He gets a report. A U-2 violated Soviet airspace. Kennedy is pushing this too far. It's 6:30 p.m. For 2 days, an American destroyer has played cat and mouse with a Soviet sub, and now they've finally caught it. For a half hour, they've signaled it with grenades. No response. Now it's time to roll out something bigger. Practice depth charges. Moscow knew that the U.S. Navy would use this signal, but no one told the submarine crews. Below, the captain of the B-59 is going mad. The sub's cooling system is broken. It's 130 degrees in there. Drained batteries force the crew to live in the dark. Unable to surface while being pursued, they haven't talked to Moscow in 48 hours. They have no idea if there's a war on. And the grenades. It sounds like someone beating the hull with a sledgehammer. And then, wham! That was a depth charge. The war has started. There's no other explanation. The captain gives the order. Load the nuclear torpedo. If his crew's gonna perish, they're gonna take the American fleet with them. At 7:30 p.m., XCOM has outlived its usefulness. Kennedy withdraws with a small corps of advisors to try and figure out how to accept the missile swap while still preserving NATO. And they've got a plan. First, they'll send a public letter agreeing to Khrushchev's first offer. The U.S. will never invade Cuba. Bobby will deliver that letter to the Soviet ambassador, along with a second secret offer. Half an hour later, the ambassador is shocked at Kennedy's demeanor. Bobby has always been eager to pick fights, but now he's empty of bluster. Time is of the essence, Kennedy says. The military wants retribution for the U-2. We can accept the non-invasion pledge publicly, but we can't make an open trade for the Turkish missiles. But take the deal, he says, and the missiles will be gone in 5 months. And by the way, if this conversation leaks, the deal's off. The ambassador leaves at a run. It's 9:52 p.m. Wham! Another depth charge. It's now or never. They are gonna vaporize as much of the American Navy as they can. Normally, 2 men have to agree to fire B-59's nuclear torpedo, the captain and the political officer. They have both voted yes. But aboard this submarine is a third man, the flotilla commander Vasily Arkhipov, and he also gets a vote. Wham! An argument breaks out on deck. Arkhipov votes no. Wham! They need to surface and get orders from Moscow. It might end their careers, but it might also save the world. The captain calms, his moment of fury passing. It will be good, at least, to breathe fresh air again. B-59 surfaces surrounded by 4 American destroyers. Its ragged crew, which has traveled further than any Soviet sub in history, defiantly unveils the red banner of the Soviet Union. October 28th.
Jeez. Like, all it took was one person to say yes to launch that nuclear torpedo, and thus everything would have been off. That close to a nuclear war. Holy shit. Like, if he said yes, we would be all in fallout. Like, no joke. I don't think any of us would be here. But that one person say billions, at least. Jeez. That close. Anyway.
It's morning in Moscow. Khrushchev has moved the Presidium to a vacation house outside the city. He can tell they are judging him for creating this mess. Reports are coming in fast. The KGB swears war is imminent. He's still trying to figure out who ordered Soviet troops to shoot down that U-2, and to decipher what message Kennedy was trying to send with the airspace violation. Then, Robert Kennedy's deal arrives. Khrushchev reads it out. The Presidium approves. Diplomats rush to cobble together a message, while Khrushchev composes a letter trying to calm Castro. Russian police halt all traffic as a car rushes the announcement to Radio Moscow. Things are developing so quickly, they're worried war could break out on the car ride. A broadcast goes out. The missiles are leaving, and the crisis is over. XCOM celebrates. Castro trashes his office. Khrushchev finally gets some sleep. These leaders had begun the crisis thinking of politics as a chessboard, a game of moves and countermoves. But by the end, they realized, almost too late, that they weren't moving chess pieces. They were throwing dice. They could place bets, but it was luck as much as skill that kept them from war. A recon photo finding a missile, a U-2 straying into enemy territory, a submarine officer voting no. The crisis was over, but the gambling would continue. One by one, these men who saved the world were removed from it. While the U.S.'s non-invasion pledge secured Castro's hold on power, his volatility during the crisis marginalized him with his Soviet allies. Cuba would never again wield such influence on the world stage. Kennedy helped cool U.S.-Soviet relations. He negotiated a test ban treaty and established a hotline so that the president could talk with the Soviet premier directly without delay. He was starting to plan a new meeting with Khrushchev in 1963 when he stepped off Air Force One in Dallas. Kennedy would be carried back aboard that plane.
In a coffin.
In his absence, a dangerous myth grew. Most of XCOM never knew about the missile swap. They thought iron-willed diplomacy backed by military force had won the day, and if it worked with the mighty Soviet Union, mightn't it work on a small country like Vietnam? In 1964, the Presidium ousted Khrushchev, citing his poor decisions, including the missile deployment. He retired to write his memoirs, an old man with no influence. The new leadership immediately began turning out long-range missiles to compete with the U.S. arsenal. Robert Kennedy wrote a book about the crisis. He served in the Senate and ran for president in 1968. He supported de-escalating the Cold War, especially in Vietnam. After winning the California primary, he stopped to shake hands with a hotel employee who'd brought meals up to his room. An assassin shot him 3 times. The handshake turned into an embrace. The young man kept Kennedy's head off the floor and put a rosary in his hand. "Is everybody okay?" Kennedy asked. One of his eyes closed. His leg was twitching. He tried to comfort the man who held him. "Everything's going to be okay." The Cold War continued for another 23 years. As of 2018, the clock is at 2 minutes to midnight.
I'm not even sure that clock is... I think it's still there, but let's be real. How about we all agree, no more nukes, huh? Way too risky, especially if tempers get high enough, especially nowadays. Oof. Ugh. There's hoping Trump does get the chance. Anyway, till next time, see ya.